Hi everyone, and a very warm welcome to this year's UK Asian Film Festival. Today we are discussing I Am Belmaya. It is directed by Sue Carpenter and Belmaya Nepali, and it's part of the UK Asian Film Festival 2021, and it is the festival's 23rd edition. We have Sue Carpenter today, and Sue has 30 years of media and communications experience and has been involved in Nepal and women's rights for 20 years. Her works include There's Something About Molly, Alice and Nana, and The Wonderful Walk. How are you today, Sue? And thank you for being here.
Pleasure, thank you.
All right, so I'm just going to jump straight in with the questions. Firstly, I Am Belmaya. It's a truthful, raw, heartbreaking and inspiring movie. I was really touched throughout. It's a tale of rebellion and hope and courage. How did you meet Belmaya, and what was it about that meeting that made you want to direct this movie?
Yeah, I met her a very long time ago now. It was 2006. And I was running a photo project for girls in Nepal, in Pokhara, and which the skyline you can see behind me now.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
so that's this little mountain there, Machu Picchu. That sort of dominates the skyline. So it's I kind of feel like I'm back in Pokhara now. And yeah, there were about 20 girls I was teaching, but Belmaya was one of them. She was orphaned and living there at age 14. But she just had this kind of different character about her. A lot of the girls are taught to be very sweet and submissive and to do what they're told. And most of them, you know, kind of maybe sort of in rather a fearful way, which is really sad, you know, kind of toe the line. But Belmaya's not like that. She's quite a naughty girl. She had a real spark. And she and one or two others, we were kind of like a little gang together with sort of up to naughty hijinks and things. And she absolutely loved the camera. She just was always grabbing it. And, you know, you can see in the film, there's some flashbacks to when she was 14 and she's always going, Sue, camera. So she kind of remained in my mind. And sadly, I had to leave because, you know, my visa ran out and I have my own daughter. I had to get back to sort of with her for her schooling back in the UK. And so I couldn't really see her for about 7 years. So it was after that we reconnected, but she kind of just remained in my mind all that time. And some of the footage I have from her back in those days, you know, it's just lovely. She just had such a spirit of joy and hope. And I kind of felt nobody had ever championed her. So that was partly, you know, my kind of attachment to her.
Did you keep in touch, or did she keep in touch during those 7 years?
We tried to, but the home that I was working through then decided after a while that they didn't want any more outside influence. They didn't want any volunteers. They didn't want any visitors. And so they kind of completely shut me out as along with everyone else. And so I couldn't keep in touch with Belmaya or the other girls, which was really sad for us both. And then I went back in 2013, which was the year before I started filming. And then I went looking for them, and I managed, on my last day in Nepal, I found Belmaya, who was then living in very different circumstances with her husband and baby daughter and living in the Terai, which you probably know, most people know, it's the borderland region with India and very rural and conservative. So living a very lowly, impoverished life there.
Despite sort of all the obstacles, you know, her environment, the society, the sort of norms and values set in that society, Belmaya sees hope, like you mentioned, and that is the theme of this year's festival, Ray of Hope. And I guess amidst all that adversity, she recognizes her power. You know, she recognizes that as a woman, she can challenge things, she can change things for herself, her daughter, and other girls in Pokhara as well. I wanted to ask you, has the work that you've been carrying out in Nepal and Belmaya's films, have you seen a change, a noticeable change, an impact in Nepal?
Well, it's difficult to talk about in Nepal as a whole because, I mean, it's just suffered so many setbacks over those years.
Yeah.
When I was there in 2006, it was still in the grip of the Maoists, and and then there was this sort of peace accord while I was there. I lived in there for 9 months. And things, started to get more hopeful then. But then, they've had setbacks. Not just there was the massive earthquake, of course, which was huge and happened during the course of our filming. So features
Oh,
as a
okay.
element of the film. I wasn't. I mean, I wasn't actually physically there then, but I'd been there literally 2 weeks before. So it was very shocking to me, and obviously hugely shocking to those living amidst it. But that set everything back, and then there was a blockade, and they've just suffered so many either natural setbacks or governmental setbacks, political setbacks, and there have been changes, and I think the cities, yes, are a bit more emancipated. But there's still some really entrenched opinions about how girls have to behave. And although education for girls, is supposed to be mandatory, still in the rural villages, it doesn't happen. Girls are basically, same in India, they're kind of commodities, aren't they? Because you have a daughter and you know that you're not going to have her for life, because when she marries, she kind of belongs to the family she marries into. So people don't invest in their daughters. But I have to say, Belmaya, of all her family, is probably doing the best now with the money she's able to make through these sort of international commissions for filmmaking. Not least one of which is from UK Asian Film Festival, which I think is going to be shown separately, but a short film that she did. So that's amazing. That kind of the money for that keeps her for 6 months or so. So yeah.
Yeah, that is magnificent. And that scene when she was sort of in her village and showing the film, and how people clapped for her and accepted what she was showing, because it's difficult to watch, your own people kind of going through this. So it felt like in the movie that maybe the thought has sparks that, our girls can be different, our girls can also be independent and work and go to school and be educated. So there was that sort of spark.
I think the ongoing, because the movie isn't released yet, it's not till October, on International Day of the Girl it will be publicly released. And then I've been doing sort of private screenings and just festival screenings this year, but even so I've done some in connection with charities, and we've raised quite a lot of money for different charities working in Nepal and for Belmaya. And they're all working in the field of trying to make an impact. So the film has made an impact in that way already, even before it's actually being shown widely. But we want to take it to the villages in Nepal and do maybe a pop-up cinema, just like we did in Belmaya's village for her own film. And she's a brilliant inspirational speaker. So I think it will have this amazing ripple effect and keep inspiring more girls to be like Belmaya.
Stylistically, tell us why you decided to make this documentary film in this way, and what was it about her succession in filmmaking alongside her life that kind of really stood out to you? Like, why was this done in this way?
Well, the overriding thing that I wanted for this film was that it was going to be Belmaya's story told by her, and not having her in that sort of, privileged white Westerner looking down on the sort of poor little girl who, whatever it might have been, which a lot of films, made in developing countries, end up being that way, where you see the sort of the wrong person at the forefront, and that's not the point. It was Belmaya's story. So giving her the tools, or for her to learn the tools of the trade so she could actually contribute and have a participatory role in the creation of the story was really important. And, you know, it's worked really well. So I wanted to show that physically throughout the film, not just kind of quietly behind the scenes be using some of her footage. You know, we're very upfront about it, that this is her lens. So there's that kind of recording frame device to show that she's taking the film. And I think that interweaving just works really nicely, because you really, I sort of sometimes really get transported again, feeling I'm her looking through her lens, when you see it actually kind of searching sometimes and sort of, you know, reframing, and then she'll there's one when she interviews her husband, isn't there, and another when she's bathing her daughter, and you just sort of see her pop out from behind the camera and join in front of the lens.
Yeah, that interview with her husband, it was I mean, there was this quite, you know, when did I do this, when did I do that, you know, it was just so true, so real, rather than sort of a scripted kind of, you know, feel. It was very like, okay, but actually, when did this happen, please tell me. So I really enjoyed watching that bit, especially.
Exactly, because if we'd interviewed her husband to find out about certain incidents, he'd have been putting his best face on and trying to present himself in a good way, because I think one naturally does do that, one wants to cover things up. But, you know, because she's, you know, they live together, it's so natural. He was trying to sort of put on a good face, but actually when she started sort of pushing his buttons and challenging him on certain things, he couldn't help but, you know, he just sort of, I mean, he said so much by not saying things, didn't he, when he said, right, next question. You sort of think he's you know, holding stuff back there.
There was this one moment where he said, she's got Belmaya has a very pure heart, but her only sort of bad habit or downfall is that she's outspoken. That was shocking. That was outrageous. That, you know, because even though he's putting his best face on and trying to show that he's a better person now, you can still see that ingrained kind of upbringing where they don't even realize it's wrong.
I know, he kind of reveals a lot about the culture, really, and where he's come from. And it's just a very, very old-fashioned, conservative, traditional mindset. And ultimately, I think that was, you know, that was the problem between them, that they couldn't ever resolve, that he wanted her to be the little wife at home, cooking and sort of being sweet to him and not minding if he got drunk and all that goes with that. And she wanted to be her own person and wasn't disrespectful and awful to him. You know, she was probably a perfectly good wife by our reckoning, but by his reckoning, not.
I saw online there was some amazing responses from people that have seen the film, and you've got raging reviews. And I wanted to just kind of find out from you, what has like, when you've watched the film with a private screening, what has the response been like in that room, and what kinds of things are people saying to you and about the movie?
Yeah, well, actually, the first one I did was just a private view for people who'd helped fund the film, because of course I have, you know, very little outside funding, but I did crowdfunding from friends and friends of friends. So they all came along, and it was the first moment, you know, I'd actually shown it to an audience. So I was so nervous, and everyone was, you know, but in fact, the whole thing that you said about, you know, the theme being hope and the ray of hope and all that, that was one of the things they said. The big message they took away from the film was one of hope, that, you know, however much adversity you have to face or however grim life is, you know, that if you've got that kind of fighting spirit to keep moving on, you really can sort of do something with your life, and you don't have to sort of fall into a victim position. So that was really nice to feel that audiences were going away feeling inspired and hopeful rather than miserable, because she, you know, has been through terrible times.
When you see somebody else's story, and despite everything, they have strength in them to make changes, and it's like, come on, let's take a learning from that, because we can do that too,
yes,
with all the privilege that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the biggest thing that we've got is that kind of freedom of to be who we are, haven't we? And I think that's
Absolutely.
the thing she suffers from most, is that there's always someone watching, you know, a neighbour or someone tutting that she shouldn't be out on her own, or she, you know, even in the daytime. And the, you know, she's now a single mother, that's got a massive stigma attached to it. So it is really, it's tough, whereas we can be all those things, can't we? Who cares if I'm a single mother, you know, nobody cares about me being a single mother.
Do you feel for yourself personally that photography and filmmaking has given you that sort of unique voice and that position to empower yourself and others, and how?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know, because a lot of the time I felt, you know, Belmaya and I were mirroring each other, because I come from a journalism and photography background, but not filmmaking. So I kind of took it up really in order to make this film. And then during the journey of making the film, I made lots of short films, which then had their own sort of successes. So was more confident at the point we sort of were halfway through production to really move this forward. So yes, I guess it has been an empowering thing. And you know, when you get to the other end and you actually get feedback, and that it's really moving people, that is amazing, because then, yes, as you say, you realize that you have a voice that can really have some sort of impact. So yes, in some ways I'm still at the beginning of my journey at this advanced age.
When the young girls in Belmaya's village were sort of shouting, come see our movie, come see our movie, I found that announcement very unique, because over here we do it very differently of how we're, you know, putting out in film. But that was very interesting to see in the village, just kind of saying, come watch it, don't miss the premiere. That was lovely. Like, what was that, what was filming that like, or including that like?
Yeah, no, well, it was such an enchanting sort of day and evening. You know, we kind of stopped halfway to get a feast, and we thought, well, we'll just put on a feast for the village, which then Belmaya and all her family cooked. And that whole preparation time, and all the kids and people started just kind of gathering, and their courtyard was gradually filling up with people and kids playing with bubbles and balloons and things. We'd just taken things up to make it a bit of a party. And then, yes, so then the kids, you know, we sort of sent them off. We said, go, you know, why don't you go and gather more people around the village? And so they got this whole chant going of, you know, don't miss Belmaya's film. And they called it the cinema hall, which we thought was so funny, that it was an outdoor kind of pop-up screen. You know, Belmaya Didi, yes, Belmaya Didi's film. At 5:30 sharp, don't miss it. And it was brilliant, because it was like the Pied Piper, you know, that as they went along, more and more people gathered, and it became this whole kind of chain going around the village. It was a really magical evening, and Belmaya, you could see it, the sort of light in her eyes when she talked about it afterwards. You know, she was incredibly moved, I think, by the whole experience.
Especially because she had fought very young, you know, against those very people and her family, and now coming back having achieved something, it is an empowering feeling in itself, that your family is finally giving you that, you know, green light. And
I think so. And her brother, Mila Dai, which is the second eldest brother, has been like the father figure in the family since her father died. So I think most of all she wanted his approval, and when he gave it, you know, and some, with tears in his eyes, you know, she just couldn't believe that. So I think, you know, it probably was one of the happiest days of her life that day, just getting that validation and seeing everybody's faces really supporting her and happy.
But there was also another very, very, very beautiful moment in that film where I was very shocked and emotional, because it was like a memory being played back to me. And it was, of course, that moment where Belmaya's film was in UK Asian Film Festival in 2018, I think. Yeah, it was 2018. Yes. And myself and Rishi Nair presented her this award. And obviously at the time I didn't know her story, but having watched this film and then being a part of this film because of you, it was very emotional. And you've not only included UK Asian Film Festival, but the other festivals as well that she went to. Why did you decide to put these sort of other festivals and other Q&As at the end of this film, which I thought was brilliant, by the way. You know, you've traveled continents. Why did that happen? What was the decision behind that?
Well, originally I didn't really have any sort of huge ambitions for what was going to happen. I just was going to watch, wait and see. Would Belmaya be able to handle the camera again, having loved it so much earlier, and you know, how would she get on that she decided to do this training with this guy, and he'd made some films before with the girls that he'd trained before, so I hoped that she would make a film out of it. That's the only kind of end goal that I saw, that she would gain skills and be able to make films. But then when she then wanted to present it to the village, and we helped to do that and followed all of that, and then she got this other commission to make a film for Thomson Reuters Foundation about the boat women, you know, that just things were growing and there were so many more things happening, and she was in such a great frame of mind. So then we thought, why don't we enter the Kathmandu International Mountain Film Festival, because that's the sort of biggest festival that all the filmmakers who are from Nepal want to be in. And instead of just being validated by her family and her community, might she get validated by the country, you know, and other filmmakers? So when she got into that with both her short films, you know, that was just amazing. And then it was kind of like, oh, why stop there? Why don't we try some international film festivals? And she just did have amazing success. I think it just really struck a chord with people. But you know, coming to the UK, I guess that's where it kind of squared the circle with my involvement, because I come from the UK, and that sort of was the catalyst for her first picking up a camera, and then for her to end up, and I do put myself briefly in the film there, you know, just a kind of reunion hug, because it was like, you know, handing the baton to her, she runs with it, and then she just comes back for her final accolade.
Was it difficult for Belmaya personally to revisit some things about her past in making this film?
The big kind of revelations about her past that we kind of learn in the first sort of act of the film, really before the crisis point with her husband, a lot of that was when she and I first re-met. So she'd kind of been bottling everything up for, you know, those 7-8 years. She hadn't sort of discussed all these things. She'd been suffering a lot in her husband's village, from, you know, domestic violence and all the other things. And I guess she'd never, you know, she'd grown up, hadn't she, from a 14-year-old, and probably all these things were on her mind that she'd never had any counselling about, or any sort of had anybody really to talk about it with. And then so for me to come back into her life, and we actually sat down and had sort of several long interview sessions, but like heart-to-heart talks, really, where we just wanted to catch up with each other, and I wanted to know sort of everything about her. Now we had a good translator who could just really sort of, you know, help me understand her life. So I think she, you know, that was a very kind of personal connection, and the way she related some of those things. There's one revelation, which again I won't sort of say in case somebody hasn't seen it, but about her parents, you know, and that I was in tears too. You know, it was just really sad things she's gone through. So I think probably, you know, catching those things at that point for her past story, you know, it helped that we'd had that connection over years. And then sort of the things that were happening in real time once we started filming, that on the one hand she was sort of going on the upward trajectory as she learnt filmmaking and felt more empowered, but at home, of course, things were going in the opposite direction. And so I think, you know, and she was also watching films. She was being sensitized a lot to documentary film, and how to, you know, how you have to have this real trust with the person filming you and talk openly. So I think at that stage, you know, she was willing to talk openly about what was happening to her and the difficulties she was going through. But what I did notice in her was, after it's sort of, then the next big thing that happened was the earthquake, and so that meant quite, you know, another year passed really while we weren't there able to kind of connect and film. Um, and the next time I came back in 2016, she definitely kind of turned a corner and she was just feeling so much stronger, but she didn't want to look back too much. And so if I tried to do extra interviews then about past stuff, she was, you know, by that stage, the empowerment had happened. So she was saying no to me. She definitely knew what she wanted to talk about and what she didn't want to, and what she was willing to do or not willing to do. And she was making her own film by then. So she wanted to pour what she wanted to say into her film on education, and, you know, have that connection with the boat women, talking to them about their lives. And I think that's sort of more how she is now. You know, she's laid those demons to rest. She's been through a lot and she doesn't really want to rake over it all again.
It's nice to hear from you that she's at a place where she seems like she's healed.
Yes, I think so. I mean, filmmakers talk about that, or documentarians, you know, about sort of being a cathartic process and part of the healing and so on. And I sort of sometimes wondered, is this rather disingenuous just to serve their purposes? But I think it is true, you know, it really does help. And it's kind of getting other people to witness, isn't it, what you've been through, and to actually, you know, kind of validate your own feelings that it was bad, and yet you were being told by your family, this isn't bad, you're bad. So to actually get the chance to have people sympathize and empathize with her must be, you know, hugely kind of supportive and a relief, I think.
I wanted to ask you personally, what were some of the challenges that you faced during the filming of this? I know it's 14 years in the making, but what were some of your personal challenges?
Yeah, I guess the biggest challenge really for me is that I don't speak Nepali. You know, I understand quite a bit now, mostly having through listening to all the footage over and over and over and over again in the edit. You know, it's sort of it's almost like, you know, language tapes. So I've got to understand, you know, some of it, but obviously when everybody's having quick fire conversations, and there are nuances of things happening that you don't really understand, you know, maybe suddenly a mood would change. For example, there was that lovely footage at Pashupatinath temple where they're visiting, and you know, it's just a kind of little interlude really, but it shows, you know, it's just a slice of life, isn't it? It's them, and she's sort of, it's the sense is she's kind of praying for good luck at the festival the next day and so on. But while we were filming that, there was suddenly something happened and I didn't know what it was, and then the voices were raised and she and her husband were really sort of shouting at this kind of security person and furious, and then they sort of stomped off and we kind of going, what was happening, and it turned out, because Biren, the husband, as I say, is from the Terai, he looks more kind of, he looks different. He doesn't look like the hill people. He's like the lowest of the low caste. And sometimes, and because it's so near to India, I don't know, there's some sort of thing about him being Indian and not Nepali, and they were saying that he was trying to get in sort of free as a Nepali and he was cheating them, and he was actually Indian, and he was furious, saying I'm not Indian, I'm Nepali. And then Belmaya was really taking his part there and sort of, you know, sort of, how dare you speak to my husband like that, he's Nepali. But you know, I had no idea really what was going on there. So things like that, you know, you just have to stand back, watch, you know, and try and sort of find out afterwards. But for me, you know, I love to know everything about everything, and I'm a great communicator. So I found it really hard not being first hand in at the sharp end, knowing everything that was happening.
How did Belmaya get some of the, because she got some job offers while she was in Pokhara to sort of go out and cover certain events. Yes. How was that? How did that happen?
How did that happen?
Yeah.
Well, I would say some probably did come through me or a connection with me. And she got another one which didn't even feature in the film because we couldn't put everything in, but to go and film in schools. And that was a British NGO that I'd put her in touch with. So yeah, I mean, I guess in a way that's the role that I see myself in usefully, that I can bring those sort of international commissions to her. So as well, it's the same, the NGO contact as well. The husband is a Gurkha. Well, he's David Thomas, who's interviewed in the film. You know, it's wonderful British Gurkha who she interviews, and so she'd met them through me. So they commissioned her to film the Gurkha parade, so that so Jo Thomas, David's wife, is a keen sort of little filmmaker as well, and so she wanted to make a film about the whole Gurkha sort of parade and all the celebrations for the 200th anniversary. So yeah, so Belmaya did the footage for that. So yeah, so you know, contacts and connections that's something I can offer, and of course something difficult for her, because same again, you know, if you're privileged and you educated and you've got that whole network, the sort of old school network, and your family network and your caste network, all of that, but she doesn't have any of that. So you know, it's hard for her in Nepal to get those sort of commissions direct. Although, you know, things have happened more now because she's begun to get a name and had films out. So, you know,
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, no, she has it's called Wow magazine in Nepal. They just honoured her as for their High Achiever Award, and they, you know, contacted her direct. They decided all that was nothing to do with me. So, you know, I think she is generating her own sort of supporter base there.
That is incredible. Everything about, you know, everything you've said about the film, it's so inspirational as a whole, and I hope that it just continues and doesn't stop, because it's beautiful.
Thank you.
Lastly, I just wanted to ask if you wanted to say something to the audience, or a parting message, or anything else that you wish to say.
Thank you so much for coming, and you know, I hope it's moved you like other people who've been seeing it. And yeah, I mean, I do see this as a stepping stone on a whole journey. And that's, I guess, what's been the most amazing and gratifying thing already for me, even before it's been released, that we've, you know, if it hadn't been actually for the whole COVID lockdown scenario, which we never imagined in a million years, you know, the year before, we wouldn't have been able to do these charity screenings, you know, in this sort of private online capacity. You know, we wouldn't have even realised that was a kind of mode of a way of doing things with kind of live Zoom Q&As afterwards. But, you know, we've now made over £12,000 for different charities. So that's kind of an amazing thing. And that then generates more people who are interested in doing something. So I just think the impact is what's amazing, that it will have these ongoing ripples. And yes, if anybody wants to do something, you know, that it's kind of like any idea you have now could work, couldn't it? There's all these new models of doing things. So for raising funds or for doing something,
amazing. Yeah, it is. COVID has obviously its bad sides, but it's also transformed creativity in a lot of ways, and maybe even helped it in some ways. So it's good to hear that that's what you've experienced as well. Okay, well, thank you all so much for listening in, and thank you so much, Sue, for coming in and, well, for being here and giving us your energy and your time and insight. The festival dates are running from the 26th of May to the 6th of June. The full programme can be accessed on www.ukaff.com. Follow us on Instagram at UK Asian Film Festival and Facebook, and our Twitter is at Come to UKAFF. Sue, if you have any sort of Instagram handles you'd like people to follow, please do mention them.
Yes, we're on everything at I Am Belmaya. So at I Am Belmaya on the 3 main platforms, Twitter, Facebook and Instagram.
Amazing. Perfect. Well, thank you. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you.